Welcome to the daily Rambam class. Today we begin the laws of Mikva'os Chapter 1. It is Thursday. Let us begin with a brief review of where we are up to in the Rambam's Mishnah Torah. We are in volume number 10, the book of Tara, Sefer Tara, the book of purity, which has none other than 144 chapters, the largest book by far. And the good news is that we are close to making a siyum, concluding volume of the Rambam. Well, what are these 144 chapters? What do they consist of? They consist of a total of 8 topics. We are now entering the final topic, the laws of Mikva'os. There are a total of 11 chapters. And just a breakdown of the topics of those chapters. The first 3 chapters will speak about immersion and intervening substances. The next 5 chapters will speak about what constitutes a kosher mikveh. The next 2 chapters will speak about different levels of mikvahs. And finally, the last chapter will deal with purifying one's hands. Well, let's now begin with Chapter 1. In today's chapter, we will be covering purification of people and vessels. That's the first 5 halachas. We'll speak about the time to go to mikveh, and then we'll speak about intervening substances that if a person has, for example, some kind of something on their hand that they don't want to be there, that will actually get in the way of their mikveh experience. We'll find out what's biblical, what's rabbinic. Please God, everything you ever wanted to know about mikvahs. Let's take a look at halacha number 1. Class. Starting with the introduction to the laws of Mikva'os, included in this text is one positive commandment that all impure individuals should immerse themselves in a mikveh and then regain purity. This mitzvah is explained in the ensuing chapters. Chapter number 1, halacha number 1. All impure entities, whether people or kalim, utensils, whether they are impure because they contracted a severe impurity of scriptural origin, or they're impure based on a rabbinic impurity, whoever they may be, whatever type of impurity, they all regain purity only through immersion in water that is collected in a pool in the ground. So far, that's the Rambam's starting off definition of a mikveh. Water that is collected in a pool in the ground. We'll speak more about that. Based on this, it sounds like we could all just jump in the pool and we're good to go. That's details to follow. Halacha number 2. Whenever the Torah mentions washing one's flesh or even laundering one's garments from impurity, the intent is solely the immersion of the entire body or article in a mikveh. A shower won't do it, neither will a bath. The Torah says, and he did not wash his hands in water, and there too it refers to the immersion of the entire body. And speaking about the Zav. This also applies to other impure people. If one immersed himself entirely with the exception of the tip of his little finger, he is still ritually impure. And by the way, similarly, even one little hair that's sticking out of the water will mean that the person is not pure. Mikveh needs to be a wholesome experience in the physical sense. Although all of these matters have their sources in the oral tradition, the Torah itself does also state, he shall enter water, he remains impure until the evening, and then he becomes pure. This is obviously talking about a person that doesn't just need mikveh, but he needs to wait a certain amount of time. This rule is then applied with regards to all those impure that what? They must enter into water. They must enter into a body of water, namely a mikveh. That is as far as people. What about utensils? All kalim that contract tumah, impurity, can be purified through immersion in the mikveh. By the way, when we talk about purifying through the immersion of the mikveh, this generally is not relevant to us because nowadays we're all in a state of impurity. This generally relates to being able to be handled by a kohen or being able to be used for sacrificial meat or brought into the temple. The concept of us toveling new dishes, that is a requirement, but that's not as far as going from a state of impurity to purity, because even if the item was never impure, it would still need to go to mikveh if it was originally under the ownership of a non-Jew when it was made. I guess that's a separate discussion. But the point of it here is we're not talking about going to mikveh when buying dishes going to mikveh, new dishes. We're talking about rather any article. It could be a table, it could be a chair, it could be any article that contracted impurity. It regains impurity through going to mikveh, with the exception of earthenware. Earthenware cannot regain impurity at all. A glass vessel and a reed mat. These things all can't regain impurity. Again, these things are toveled as far as kashrus, the laws of kosher. But we're not speaking about the laws of kosher here. We're speaking about the laws of taking something from an impure state of being to a pure state of being. With regards to an earthenware container, so let's bring some sources over here. The Torah says, you shall break it, implying that its purification comes only through breaking it. Even if it was joined to the earth, even if it was affixed to it with a nail, if you nailed it into the ground. Now we have a principle that anything that's connected to the ground does not contract impurity. So you might say, let's nail it into the ground. Well, had you nailed it into the ground before it contracted impurity, then it maybe would have been absolved. An oven is a little different. But now that it already did contract impurity, it needs to be broken. Even if it was filled with lime or gypsum, it retains its impurity until it is broken. Our sages considered glass kalim like earthenware containers in this respect as well. Moving along. A reed mat is not included among the kalim that are susceptible to other types of impurity. And he says other types, I think he means aside from that of a zav, which gives impurity through going on things that he sits or lies on. But a reed mat is actually, what's the word I'm trying to think of in English? Either way, it cannot be harmed. It's invincible from impurity. Why? Since it does not have a receptacle, it is not in the category of the wooden kalim mentioned by the Torah. Remember, we said for wood to receive impurity, to be susceptible, it has to have a receptacle as opposed to metal. Nevertheless, since it is for to lie upon, it was included among the kalim susceptible to midras impurity according to scriptural law, which is a different form of impurity, which is imparted by sitting or lying on something, even if it's not touched, which we spoke about from those 4 sources of impurity at great length. Now, since there's no explicit mention of its association with purity and impurity in the Torah, and yet it was included among the articles that contract impurity through a zav, it was not included with regards to purification through immersion in a mikveh. So actually this mat, like an earthenware vessel, also can never become purified. Since biblically speaking, in other contexts, it didn't become impure, therefore it doesn't have the antidote, it doesn't have the purification process, even in scenarios where it can become impure. Well, only kalim mentioned in the Torah can be purified in a mikveh. A reed mat can be purified only by being torn to the extent that it remains less than 6 handbreadths. A handbreadth, we say, is about 8 centimeters. So we're talking about 6 times 8, 48, approximately half a meter. Less than that remains that's intact. At that point, it's considered broken enough to regain its purity. So until now, we spoke about 2 general categories. We spoke about people and we spoke about utensils. Now we speak about a little bit more zoomed in, different types of people. A zav, which is a person of the most serious type of impurity, can only be purified through immersion in a mayan, in a spring. Not sure why he translates it as a stream. because if that stream is coming from the rain, if you have a lot of rain coming down, and then you have a lot of you have a river that's been developed by the rainfalls, that would not qualify. And specifically, what's called a mayan. I don't know if you've heard of the yeshiva Mayanot. Mayanot means the well springs. And that's based on a tradition of an encounter between the Baal Shem Tov and Mashiach, which we'll speak about another time. But the point of it here is that somebody who's of a more severe severe type of impurity, he actually wouldn't be able to go to your average mikveh in town. It could be the best mikveh. It could be state of the art with every possible halachic stringency, but it will not qualify for a zav. Actually, some of today's mikvahs will. When we come to the building of the mikvah, maybe that will be touched upon by whoever's teaching at that point. Okay, I'll say very briefly, but let's first finish the halacha. The Torah says that he must immerse himself in living water. That's only a zav, but a zava and other persons in kelim that are impure may immerse or be immersed in a regular mikvah. So some mikvahs today, for example, the Great Park mikvah, was actually made with not just rainwater, but spring water. Which means that when they built the mikveh, they dug into the ground deep enough to find natural water. Now, usually that wouldn't help because it's very nice for the natural water to be down under, but the moment you pick it up, it's not kosher. So the only way it would work would be if you actually went down there, but it's very far down. It's very far. There are mikvahs in the world today, like not used today, but been discovered in different places in Europe, where they have these extremely long stairwells where they actually didn't just dig a hole down to spring water, but they actually made a space with a stairwell where a person can go down to that water, because the second the water is lifted up, it's disqualified. Well, what they did in the Great Park Mikveh and others was they put a compressor that shoots air down into the spring water, into the borehole, and the air causes the water to shoot up. And this is modern technology finding a way to be able to bring spring water up without being handled by any utensils. Air is not a utensil. Now, that said, this logically should work. No reason why it shouldn't work. But since this is a modern invention, so they won't make mikvahs from that alone, because after all, the water was brought up, albeit with nothing but air, and therefore they'll use natural rainwater that falls straight from the roof. Gets very interesting. But the reason why I mentioned it now was because a zav would not be able to go to mikveh. In a regular mikveh, it needs to be a spring. Halacha number 6. All those obligated to immerse may, so now we said time. Halacha 6 is time. May immerse during the day, with the exception of a niddah and a woman after childbirth. They must immerse at night, as we explained with regards to the laws of niddah. So just to remind you what we said there, we said that when a woman becomes impure, or when a woman has a period, she needs to count 7 days. So it's not just going to mikveh, but it's also a time frame. And therefore, if she were to go to mikveh before the end of that time frame, then it would be ineffective. Now, even if she's waited the full amount of time she needs to wait, which today is not just 7 days, it's more like 12 days or 7 days. Anyhow, we won't get into those details. But even if she has waited the full 7 days, and now it's, let's say, day 10. I don't know, maybe she was busy climbing Mount Everest. Now she came back to civilization and it's day 10. She still needs to wait till night to go to mikveh. A woman always goes to mikveh at night. Why? Because the rabbis were concerned that if you're going to let her go during the day, then she might go before the end of the 7th day in another scenario. However, since this is just an added fence, Leniency is granted in exceptional circumstances where the rabbis will allow her to go to the mikveh by day if it's already onto the 7th day and other things are in place to be sure that she will wait until nightfall before she interacts with her husband. But what we've said so far is a woman must go to mikveh at night. That's the general rule. Nida. Somebody who has a seminal emission may immerse throughout the entire day from the beginning of the night. So meaning once he's waited his day and he's seen that he's been pure for the whole day, then he could go anytime, by night or by day. This is derived from the Torah, which says that it shall be that towards evening he shall immerse in water. This teaches that he may immerse and continue in his state from the beginning of the night until the night falls the following day, meaning a man, on the other hand, could go to mikveh by night or by day. Today, nowadays, when we don't have a temple, there's no biblical requirement for a man to go to mikveh, unless somebody was going through conversion. But if he did, that would be able to be done during the day. All those during the day, if it's for conversion, because the rule wasn't about men versus women, it was about somebody who's in a state of nida, so she needs to go to mikveh at night. All those who immerse should immerse their entire bodies while undressed at one time. They can't first put one foot in it and then take that out and then put the other foot in. If the person has hair, all of his hair must be immersed. It is considered as part of his body according to scriptural law. Even a person's hair is still part of his being. It needs complete immersion. Whenever impure individuals immersed while wearing clothes, the immersion is acceptable because the water passes through the clothes and they do not intervene. Similarly, if a niddah immersed in her clothes, she is permitted to resume relations with her husband. Now, this would obviously be unless she had a tight bandage. If she had anything that was tight that didn't allow the water to go through, then that would not qualify. So this is provided that all of his or her clothes were loose, then biblically speaking, the entire body has come into contact with the mikveh waters. But practically speaking today, a person who goes to mikveh is required to go without clothes to ensure that there isn't any intervening substances. Now, all those who immerse must have the intent to purify themselves through immersion. There needs to be kavanah, intention. If one did not have such intent, so the immersion would be acceptable as far as eating ordinary foods. Also, a niddah who immersed without intent, for example, if she fell into water or descended into water to cool off, is permitted to her husband. Nevertheless, with regards to teruma and sacrificial foods of higher purity, she is not considered pure until she immerses with the proper intent. So mikveh, in the context of marital life, does not require intention. I mean, to be clear, nowadays we want to be sure that there isn't any intervening substance, like even any dirt that might have accumulated under a nail. Anything that would bother the person needs to be removed. So that's why going to mikveh today is a process that requires investment of time and energy to do it ideally. But we're talking biblically speaking, if a person went to mikveh without realizing it in the context of marital relations, they would be pure. When a person ties his hands and feet and is seated in an irrigation canal, see, we have a question about men going to mikveh. Let's see if we can get back to that at the end. So he tied his hands and feet and is seated in an irrigation canal. If the water covers his body entirely, he is pure. So although the water is not, meaning he's positioned himself that the flow of the water is completely submerging himself. But if the water wasn't flowing, it wouldn't. So that works, but that would obviously be provided that the canal is a live source of water. It's a wellspring. Now, why does he mention that he tied his hands and feet? Why would he need to tie his hands and feet? Let me take a quick peek over here if I could get an answer to that. Okay, so basically, tying it meaning he holds them so tightly together to ensure that they're completely submerged. But then again, the string wouldn't be allowed to be too tight because that would be an issue. When a person jumps into a mikveh, he is reprehensible. In Hebrew, he is despicable. That would be my translation. Beguna, somebody who jumps in. What's the problem with jumping into a mikveh? This is something that's already discussed in the Gemara. It's not an honorable way. It looks like he's going for a dive. He's making a joke out of it. Even if he's doing it for the mitzvah, it's not being done with honor. When one immerses in a mikveh twice, it's also a guna. Again, it's as if you're saying that he wasn't purified until he did it 2 times. It's as if you're saying that you need more than once in order to become pure. Practically speaking, nowadays, people that do go to mikveh do often dump a few times, but it's clear that they're not doing that to regain legal purity, but maybe just for other added spiritual purity. I don't have much information on that, but there are traditions of different Kabbalists like the Arizal and different people going under the water a number of times. When one tells a friend, place your hand upon me in the mikveh, is again despicable. Why? Because he's trying to be extra full. I don't know if I really went under, so like push me down, make sure I'm in. That's out of line. That's not the way to do it. Just be normal. Okay. Now, when we talk about the person's body being entirely touched by the mikveh waters, to what extent? So water from the mikveh need not seep into the non-visible portions or the creases of a person's body, as implied by the verse, and he did not wash his hands in water. It can be inferred that it is necessary only that visible portions of the body, like hands, be in contact with the water. So the water practically only needs to engage with the exterior of the person's body. Nevertheless, the non-visible portions must be fit for water to reach them without there being any intervening substances upon them. Therefore, our sages instructed at home, a person should always teach that a woman should rinse between the folds of her body and then immerse, meaning she should remove any dirt, even in any inner folds, so that there's no intervening substance, so that the water has the ability to reach every place. And once it has that ability, then it's fine. A woman should immerse as she stands. Normally when weeping or when nursing her child, it gives it a particular position. I imagine this is just... I know there actually are different traditions today as far as in what way to immerse, from what position. Okay, basically weaving, a person lifts up their arms, in which case their armpits are open, they're not sealed shut. And feeding is about also giving access to creases that may be under the place where she feeds. So basically, she should spread out. She should spread out, enabling the water to go throughout the body. Halacha number Yud Aleph. A woman should not immerse in a harbor. Why not? Because she will be embarrassed because of the inhabitants of the city and will not immerse properly. Meaning, if it's a public space, it doesn't qualify for the mikveh. Halachically, it won't work. Why? Because there are people around and she'll be embarrassed and she's going to be nervous. She's not going to be comfortable in a comfortable enough state of mind to immerse correctly, completely, with every last hair. If mats were erected as a screen for the purpose of modesty, then she may immerse in a harbor. A woman should not immerse while standing on an earthenware container, on a basket or the like, because she will be afraid of falling and the immersion will not be acceptable. So this all plays out today in modern terms that the mikveh experience needs to be a very calm, comfortable experience, so that a woman is able to have that peace of mind to ensure that she goes to mikveh right, as opposed to if there's hazards or there's uncomfortability, then that will undermine her comfortableness and endanger her ensuring that she goes to mikveh correctly. So now a modern day example of that would be that a woman should preferably not go to mikveh in a cold mikveh, for the simple reason that nowadays, when we're not used to going into just cold bodies of water, if it's cold, she might be uncomfortable and therefore not be comfortable to completely immerse, as opposed to if it's a nice hot spa-like mikveh, then she's comfortable to take her time and she's not running out because of the cold. But either a human or a kli is immersed. There should not be any intervening substance between them and the water. I see we're running out of time. The next few halachas will all talk about intervening substances. If there is any intervening substance between them and the water, for example, there was dough or mud clinging to the flesh of a person or the substance of a kli, the person or the kli is impure as it was originally, and the immersion is invalid. Now, how much of an intervening substance must there be? According to scriptural law, if there is an intervening substance covering the majority of the person's body or the majority of the utensil, then the immersion is valid. This also relates to when we do take our new dishes to the mikveh to become kosher. So we often ask about removing labels. So biblically speaking, only if the label covered majority of the dish, it would be invalid. If he objected to the intervening substance and would like to remove it. If, however, he does not object to it and does not pay any attention to whether it would be removed or not, it is not considered as an intervening substance, even if it covers majority of the portion of the person or the kli. I'm going to sum this up in a moment. Similarly, if it covers less than half of a person's body, it's not considered as an intervening substance, even if he objects to it. That's biblically speaking. Rabbinically speaking, any intervening substance that one objects to invalidates the immersion, even if it covers only the lesser portion of the person's body. This is a decree, lest such a substance cover the greater portion of the person's body, and any intervening substance that covers a larger portion of the person's body disqualifies the immersion, even if he does not object to it. This is a decree, lest the substance that one objects to cover the greater portion of the body. Thus, if even a drop the size of a mustard seed of an intervening substance, dough, tar, or the like, was on a person's flesh or on the substance of a kli, and he objects to it, his immersion is disqualified. If it does not object to it, the immersion is acceptable unless the intervening substance covers the majority of the portion of the kli of the person, as explained. Wow. Let me say that in simple English, and then we'll take the test. Practically speaking, when a person goes to mikveh, well, let's say biblically speaking, if a person goes to mikveh, there cannot be intervening substances. What constitutes intervening substances? It's only considered an intervening substance if it both covers the majority of his body and bothers him. The same with an item. If you had a nice big label that said, that this bowl is 50% off, and it covered majority of the bowl, and you don't want it there, then even biblically speaking, putting it into the mikveh does nothing. But if he does not mind it being there, or if it's only on a minority of the dish, then biblically speaking, it would be purified. The rabbis say that it's the other extreme. Only if, and it was as a safeguard, only if it's both covering a minority of the person or dish, and he does not mind it being there, then it's fine. What this means practically is when you do get your new dishes and you want to make them kosher by taking them to mikveh, so you take off the label, but if there's a little bit of adhesive or something sticking to the dish, the bottom of the dish from the label that's not coming off. So since it's covering a minority of the dish and you don't mind if it stays there for the lifespan of this dish, then that's fine. It's not a problem. If it will bother you, if it will irritate you, then you need to get it off now. Same thing with a person going to mikveh. If a person is going to mikveh, they have a little bit of, they need to make sure that there's a little bit of, let's say, dirt under their nails. So if it bothers them, meaning that they're not comfortable to walk around with dirt under their nails, then that is an intervening substance, because rabbinically, if either it bothers you or it covers the majority of your body or item. So covering the majority of your item or bottom, that's probably not going to happen. But if it's covering a minority, then as long as it bothers you, it's a problem. And therefore, it can happen sometimes where that's why a woman needs to have a lot of time beforehand to prepare and ensure that she does it correctly. If it happens that a woman came out of the mikveh and then discovered that there's still maybe something that she didn't notice before, so then the question the rabbi would ask her is, would you be comfortable going about to an event, to a function, to a wedding with this, whatever it is, dirt or whatever it is on your on the back of your ear? And if she said she would be uncomfortable, then it means that if it bothers her, she would need to go to mikveh again. If she said that wouldn't make any difference to me at all, then since it does not bother her, it's a non-intervening substance, and therefore the tevilah would be successful. Test your knowledge. And after that, I could speak briefly about why Hasidim, men, go to mikveh every morning, and even Ashkenazim on a Friday afternoon for Shabbos. A men's mikveh, that is. Which of the following types of kalim do not achieve purity through immersion in a mikveh? Metal kalim, stone kalim, or glass kalim?
Glass.
Glass.
Well done. Question number